Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you an impressive and revealing story. Let's meet Selene Whitaker, a former software engineer who died for 18 minutes and had a direct encounter with Jesus Christ. What he revealed about the impact of technology on human spirituality will give you goosebumps. The screens we use every day could be taking us away from God in ways no one imagines. So, before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready, because what you're about to hear could completely change the way you see the world. My name is Selene Whitaker, and if someone had told me 10 years ago that I would leave my career in Silicon Valley to become a nun in an isolated monastery in New Mexico, I would have been amused. I was a woman of science, logic, and technological progress. I worked as a senior software engineer, led teams that created powerful algorithms for social networks, perfected systems that captured people's attention, and kept them scrolling endlessly on their screens. I was one of those minds that shaped the digital behavior of modern society, and for a long time I was proud of it. But over time, something inside me began to change. I started to notice patterns. The way people around me seemed more connected to their devices than to each other. I saw couples in restaurants who didn't even exchange words because they were too busy checking notifications. I saw children clinging to tablets, parents distracted by endless feeds, friends who spent hours together without really interacting. And I realized that, in a way, I had contributed to this reality. Dissatisfaction grew inside me like a shadow. What once seemed like progress started to seem like an invisible prison. The more I observed, the more I questioned myself. Were we really making progress? Or were we just moving away from what really mattered? It was then that I discovered the monastery. I was at a conference on digital innovation when, during a break, I walked into a small chapel attached to the event. I'm not sure what took me there. Maybe it was just the desire for a moment of silence. But upon entering, I was surprised by an indescribable peace. The contrast between that sacred space and the chaotic environment of the event was brutal. While outside people discussed artificial intelligence and user engagement, inside there was only silence, candles, and a nun kneeling in prayer. Something inside me stirred. I had spent years immersed in logic, numbers, algorithms, but there, in that peaceful space, I felt something I couldn't explain. For a moment, I wished my world was more like that. The desire grew in the following months. I started visiting churches, looking for answers in places I had never looked before, until one day, I made the most radical decision of my life. I left my position, my career, my home in San Francisco, and joined the monastery in Santa Fe. The transition was not easy. I wasn't like the other nuns. While they had grown in faith, I still struggled with my doubts. As they talked about the importance of prayer and contemplation, my mind calculated lines of code. At the monastery, I was assigned to work with technology. It was my specialty, after all. My role was to manage the monastery's social media, update the website and ensure that our live broadcasts reached believers around the world. But I wondered, night after night, if this was right. Was I bringing the world into the monastery when what we needed was to move away from it? Was technology a useful tool or just another distraction? I didn't know. I had no answers. What I didn't imagine was that these answers would come in a way I could never have predicted. On the night of the accident, the air was cold and heavy with the promise of a distant storm. The monastery was enveloped in reverent silence, and the previously clear sky was now filled with dense clouds, hiding the stars. I slowly climbed the stone steps of the bell tower, holding the rope tightly. The ritual of announcing evening prayers always brought me a sense of purpose, but that night there was something different. The electricity in the air seemed to vibrate against my skin, and I remembered that we had been experiencing problems with the electrical wiring for the past few weeks. Repairs made by technicians never seemed to actually solve the problem. The lights in the tower's corridor flickered sporadically, and the room had a subtle smell of burning metal. Something inside me hesitated, a small voice whispering for me to wait, but I ignored it. It was a trivial calling of the mind, a baseless fear, I thought. After all I had to do was pull the rope. I placed my hands on the thick fiber of the bell and pulled. At the exact moment the bell echoed through the monastery, a violent crack resounded through the space, followed by an explosion of sparks coming from an electrical box in the wall. Before I could react, a brutal shock went through my body. The pain was immediate and absolute. Incandescent heat coursed through my veins, burning every fiber of my being. My muscles contracted violently, and my vision became a blur of white light and pulsing shadows. I tried to breathe, but it was as if the air had been knocked from my lungs. For a brief moment, I felt like I was trapped inside my own body, unable to move or scream. Then the pain disappeared. My body was thrown backwards from the force of the impact, and the world around me dissolved into absolute silence. I didn't hear my body hit the ground. I didn't feel the cold of the stone against my skin. Time seemed to stretch, and for a moment, I no longer existed within the barriers of what I once called reality. There was no fear, just a strange emptiness, as if I had been ripped from the world without resistance. There was no more sound, just a distant echo of the bell ringing, vibrating through the air like a farewell. Down below, the nuns must have been listening to the call to prayer, without imagining that the ringing of that bell had announced my own death. The silence was profound, almost palpable. I knew, in some inexplicable way, that I was no longer in my body. There was no pain, fear, or panic, just absolute peace. Then something changed. I saw my body lying on the floor of the tower, motionless, eyes half closed. A wisp of smoke rising from the tips of my fingers burned by the shock. For an instant, the shock of the scene hit me. It was me. I was looking at myself, but I felt no connection to that fallen form. It just looked like an empty shell. The idea should have been terrifying, but it wasn't. Instead, I felt a strange relief, as if I had been freed from a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. The sounds gradually began to return. Distressed voices, hurried steps. The tower door was opened with force, and I saw Sister Evelyn be the first to run to me. The terror on her face was visible as she fell to her knees beside my body. "She's not breathing." I heard her scream. Sister Agnes, the superior of the monastery, entered soon after, carrying a rosary between her fingers. His normally serene face was pale. "Call the paramedics. Start CPR," she ordered. Evelyn began chest compressions, tears in her eyes. Her breathing labored with despair. I saw her pressing down hard on my ribs, counting each movement as she tried to bring my body back to life, but I wasn't there. He floated above the scene, observing everything with impossible clarity. I could hear the nuns' prayers as if they were music, each word resonating with a crystal-clear vibration. Each pleading sigh, each plea for my return, seemed to shine like a golden thread in the air around them. That's when I noticed something strange. My phone was lying next to my body, and the screen was still on. The bluish light shone unnaturally against the cold stones. The prayer app was still open, but somehow it felt wrong, out of place, as a symbol of something much bigger that I didn't yet understand. The scene below began to fade. The air around me turned liquid, as if I was being gently pulled somewhere else. I saw the monastery disappear, the voices become distant, and then everything turned into light. I was taken to something I couldn't describe. A passage, a tunnel, a path made of pure living energy. I couldn't resist. There was no reason to resist. I was going home. The light was not just light. It was something alive, pulsating, that involved everything I was and at the same time seemed to be part of me. I didn't walk. I didn't fly. I didn't move the way a physical body moves. I simply flowed. It was as if every particle of that space vibrated in harmony with my own essence, as if I were immersed in something greater than anything I could comprehend. There was no time. There was no before or after, just the now, stretching out infinitely, filled with a peace that was as dense as the air he used to breathe in the physical world. Every worry, every doubt, every memory of suffering simply dissolved. And then, as if my own thinking shaped the environment around me, the colors began to change. The brilliant white of the space around me gave way to golden and bluish hues, soft shapes that seemed to dance and pulse in harmony. The tunnel in front of me expanded, and I realized I was being drawn into something even larger. I knew I was going to God. The idea did not come as a thought, but as absolute knowledge. It was as if my soul had always remembered this place, as if everything I was had originated there. It was the house I never knew I was looking for. Then, I started to feel something even more powerful, a love that enveloped me completely. But it wasn't a love like the one we know on earth. It was something pure, without expectations, without conditions, without the need for return. It was the very fabric of existence. It was at that moment that I realized that I wasn't alone. A presence began to form before me. It wasn't a human silhouette. It wasn't a traditional figure. It was something beyond comprehension, a golden light that seemed to contain within it all the love and truth of the universe. And then, he spoke, but not with words. It was a direct communication, spirit to spirit, without the limitation of sounds or phrases. It was as if every particle of me understood his message at the same time, as if every fiber of my being was bathed in absolute truth. "My daughter," he said, and upon hearing this, everything within me bowed in reverence. I didn't need to ask who he was. I knew. Before me was Jesus Christ. But he was not like the paintings. He was not like the religious icons that I had seen throughout my life. He was pure love, absolute understanding, and he was there to show me something that would change everything. When he spoke to me, it was not a sound but a truth that poured into me like an overflowing river. Each word was a vibration that resonated in my soul, an instantaneous knowledge that I didn't need to process. You knew. "I need to show you something," he said, and the space around us has transformed. The golden light that surrounded us began to pulse, and before me, a vision took shape. I saw the world like never before. In the beginning, it was a vast and beautiful landscape, filled with golden threads that connected souls to one another. These threads glowed brightly, weaving together like a sacred tapestry. "These are the spiritual bonds of humanity," he explained. "They were created to be strong, unbreakable, sustained by genuine love, by the communion between my children, and by the bond with the Father." For a moment, I felt immense joy at how connected everything was. It was beautiful. It was perfect. But then, something has changed. I saw a shadow spreading over the landscape. An invisible veil began to envelop the people, and the golden threads began to unravel, replaced by something different. Artificial lines, cold, lifeless, began to appear in their place. They were not organic. They did not pulse with divine light. They were digital connections. People who were once linked heart to heart now. They looked at bright screens, immersed in small, luminous rectangles that seemed to suck their attention away from reality. "What you are seeing," Jesus continued, "is what happens when spiritual bonds are replaced by artificial imitations." I was horrified when I realized what was happening. People were being deceived. They thought they were more connected than ever, but in reality, they were more isolated than they had ever been. I saw couples sitting next to each other, but without exchanging words, just sliding their fingers across screens. I saw children seeking solace in tablets instead of their parents' arms. I saw churches where worshipers took photos of sermons instead of actually listening to them. I saw friends who, instead of looking each other in the eye, communicated through instant messages. They exchanged presents for distraction, Jesus said sadly. Then he showed me something even more disturbing. We social networks, the algorithms that I previously helped build, and I finally understood what they really were. Every like, every notification, every new piece of information posted on people's screens created small flashes of dim light, like illusory sparks. The people fed on these sparks, but they were never satisfied. They needed more and more, endlessly scrolling their screens, searching for something that would never fill them. "They are spiritually hungry," Jesus said, "and instead of seeking me, they seek this." My heart sank. Was this what I had helped create? That's when I realized. The notifications, the alerts, the endless feeds, they weren't just distractions. They were interference. Jesus looked at me with love, but also with a firmness that made me feel the gravity of what was happening. "They can't hear me anymore," he said. "The voice of the world is so loud that my voice becomes but a whisper." And then, he showed me something even worse. The light around us flickered, and the view changed. The world before me has transformed into a vast digital city, made up of numbers, data, and invisible networks that connected everything and everyone. But there was something strange there. At first, it seemed like a breakthrough. People connected globally, information instantly accessible, the ability to communicate with anyone at any time. But then, the truth behind this connection began to emerge. The digital threads that connected people did not shine like the golden threads of spiritual communion. They were cold, lifeless, and, most frightening of all, they were controllable. I saw a young man waking up in the morning, reaching for his phone before he even opened his eyes fully. His first reflex wasn't prayer or gratitude or connection with his family. It was to swipe the screen. I saw how his mood changed with the information he received, how each notification set the tone for his day. Then I noticed something even more disturbing. He was not in control. The technology, it didn't just distract him, it directed him. "Now watch carefully," Jesus said, and suddenly I saw the invisible gears turning behind the scenes. The algorithms, the personalized feeds, the automatic suggestions, all of this was shaping people's minds, defining what they believed, what they valued, and even how they reacted emotionally. "This is the new Tower of Babel," Jesus said. The vision expanded and I saw millions of people interacting with their screens, but each isolated in their own digital world, living inside invisible bubbles. What was once a space of connection had become a place of separation, of illusion. "The original Tower of Babel was built to reach the heavens without me," he continued. "Now this new tower is built to keep them away from me." I clearly saw what was happening. People were exchanging divine wisdom for algorithms. They looked for answers on Google instead of in prayer. They followed influencers like modern spiritual guides. They placed more faith in artificial systems than in God's guidance. Then I saw something even worse. The light around us flickered, and the digital city turned into a gray haze. The glowing screens were the only source of light in this gloomy environment, and I saw millions of people walking like shadows, eyes fixed on their devices, unable to perceive the darkness around them. "This is not happening by force," Jesus explained. "They're choosing it." I saw souls that once shone brightly are now weakened, drained by constant distraction, by the endless cycle of digital stimuli. I saw how the world was becoming a place where people were addicted to instant gratification, unable to bear the silence. "And if they cannot bear silence," Jesus said, "how can they hear my voice?" My soul trembled before this truth. Then he showed me something even more devastating. The darkness around us pulsed like a living entity. The glowing screens were still there, like little beacons in the pitch black. But as I looked closer, I saw that they weren't just emitting light. They were absorbing something. "Notice," Jesus said, and my spiritual eyes were opened to see what was previously hidden. The screens sucked attention, energy, focus, the very essence of people. Every endless scroll of a feed, every like, every notification, all of it was draining their vitality in a subtle, almost imperceptible way. But what shocked me most was seeing spiritual entities hidden within this system. Dark forces moved among the codes, among the algorithms, hidden in the patterns that controlled digital engagement. It wasn't just machines influencing human behavior. There was something deeper, darker, manipulating what people saw, felt, and believed. "This is spiritual warfare," Jesus said, his voice filled with sadness and firmness. "And many of my children don't realize they are in the middle of it." I saw how social networks, instead of being connection tools, were becoming battlegrounds for spirits of anxiety, comparison, and despair. I saw young people posting their edited lives, trying to fit into unrealistic standards and feeling insufficient when they couldn't. I saw adults consuming manipulated news, feeling anger and fear without realizing they were being programmed to react that way. "They believe they have control," Jesus continued, "but in fact, they are controlled." I felt my own spirit shake. I had spent years developing algorithms, believing I was helping people connect, but now I saw what was really happening. "See what is being lost," Jesus said, and the scenario changed again. I saw a world where the sacred silence was gone. People no longer had moments of contemplation. The time that was once dedicated to prayer and listening to God was now occupied by flashing screens and artificial sounds. And then, I saw something even worse. The churches were full, but many of the people, they weren't really there. They were distracted, pulling out their phones to check messages during the sermons. I saw priests and pastors adjusting their words to please the algorithms instead of speaking the truth. I saw how even the houses of God were being infiltrated by digital distraction. "This is like the incense that was burned to idols," Jesus said. "Every moment of attention, every touch of the screen, is an act of devotion. But to whom is this devotion being directed?" My spirit was shaken, and tears burned my eyes. "They don't realize," I murmured, my voice breaking. "They don't know what they are becoming. They still have a choice," Jesus replied. "And that's why you need to see this." The environment around us pulsed once again. "And now," he said, "I will show you what is to come." The scenery around us changed again, and what I saw chilled me to the core. Two futures unfolded before me, like roads diverging on the horizon. The first future was a nightmare. Technology had completely merged with human life. There was no more silence, no more moments of contemplation. People lived immersed in a constant flow of information, receiving stimuli every second, unable to spend even a moment disconnected. I saw families having dinner in complete silence, not because they were at peace, but because everyone was fixated on their screens. Children learning to interact more with artificial intelligence than with their own parents. Empty churches, faith being replaced by quick Google searches, by short and distorted content about spirituality. But what shocked me most was seeing how God's presence was becoming increasingly difficult to feel. "Souls become like radios out of tune," Jesus explained. "The more noise, the harder it is to hear my voice." I saw people praying mechanically, but never feeling an answer. I saw anxious hearts, restless minds, a spiritual void that grew without anyone knowing how to fill it. And then, Jesus showed me the culmination of this dark future. I saw a world where technology not only distracted people from God, she governed them. The systems were so advanced that the most basic decisions were made by algorithms. Artificial intelligence controlled jobs, economies, even beliefs. I saw a future where people needed a digital system to buy and sell, and anyone who didn't conform to this system was excluded. "This has already begun," Jesus said, "but it hasn't reached its peak yet. You can still choose." And then, the second future appeared before me. In this future, technology still existed, but it was used as a tool, not as a master. People had rediscovered the value of silence. I saw families gathered in prayer, learning to turn off your devices to listen to God. I saw churches full of believers who were truly present, souls who had learned to discern between the useful and the harmful in the digital age. I saw people who used technology consciously, without becoming slaves to it. I saw young people who knew how to balance the digital world with the real world, who learned to seek the presence of God before turning to social media. "This is the choice each person must make," Jesus said, "and that's the message you'll take back." I felt the importance of these words echoing inside me. Humanity was at a crossroads, and each individual's decision would determine which of these futures would become reality. I looked at Jesus, my heart heavy, my soul on fire. "I get it," I whispered. "I will speak." He smiled, and then everything disappeared. The impact of the return was brutal. A moment before, I stood before Jesus, watching the destiny of humanity unfold before me, and the next moment I felt my body again, heavy, suffocating, painful. Air rushed into my lungs, as if I were emerging from underwater after minutes of not breathing. My eyes opened in shock, and the first thing I saw was the cold fluorescent lights of the hospital. There were voices around me, confusing sounds, machines beeping. My heart beat uncontrollably, as if trying to compensate for the minutes it had been stopped. My hands were shaking, and my chest ached with a strange pressure, as if an invisible weight were weighing down on me. Then, I heard a muffled scream. "She's back, my God, she's back." Era Sister Evelyn. She was holding my hand, her eyes full of tears, her mouth open in shock. She looked at me as if she were seeing a miracle, and indeed she was. The commotion spread throughout the room. Other nuns were there, along with nurses and doctors. I saw the astonishment on their faces. This doesn't make sense," muttered one of the doctors, a middle-aged man with glasses sliding down his nose. He looked at the machines around me, as if he were waiting for some anomaly, some error in the system that might explain what had just happened. That's when I realized something. I should be dead. My mind was still confused, but I knew that my heart had stopped for 18 minutes. No human brain survives this without severe damage. No body comes back to life without consequences. And yet, there I was, lucid, conscious, feeling every cell vibrating with an energy that did not belong to this world. The doctor shook his head, still trying to process the impossible. "Your signals are stable. There is no arrhythmia. There is no brain damage. This shouldn't be possible." But it was. The eyes of Sister Agnes, the monastery superior, were full of understanding. She didn't need any exams or medical explanations. She knew what had happened. God had brought me back. I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry as if I hadn't used my voice in years. I made an effort and, with a hoarse whisper, managed to say my first words since returning. I saw. The room was silent. Everyone looked at me. I saw Jesus. A shiver ran through the room. Some doctors looked uncomfortable, but the nuns held their breath. I knew I needed to tell what had happened. I needed to share the truth that had been revealed to me. But before he could say anything else, a crushing weight of emotions fell on me. Tears ran down my face without me noticing. The enormity of what I had experienced hit me all at once. I had died. I had stood before Christ. And now, I was here again. The question that burned in my soul was inevitable. Why? And then, as if someone had whispered inside me, I knew the answer, because I had a mission. In the following days, I stayed in the hospital for observation, but my vital signs remained inexplicably normal. The doctors expected some failure, some delayed symptom of the clinical death I had suffered, but nothing came. I was completely sane, the looks of doubt mixed with those of astonishment. The doctors tried to explain it scientifically, while the nuns understood it spiritually. But I knew that no matter how many tests they did, they would never find an answer that made sense within human logic. And while my body seemed to be intact, my soul was in a different state. I wasn't the same anymore. In the silence of the hospital room, every time I closed my eyes, the visions returned, the golden threads breaking, the new digital Tower of Babel, souls being drained by distraction. The voice of Jesus echoed in my mind. They can't hear me anymore. The voice of the world is so loud that my voice becomes but a whisper. You need to talk. But how? I felt like a stranger in my own skin. Before the accident, I still had doubts about faith, about technology, about my role in the monastery. Now, those doubts had dissipated like mist in the sun. I knew the truth, but this truth was heavy. On the third night, I woke up with Sister Agnes sitting next to my bed. The soft light from the lamp illuminated her serene face, and she held a rosary between her fingers. "You haven't been sleeping well," she said bluntly. I took a deep breath. There was no reason to deny it. "I can't," I admitted. "What I saw won't leave my head." She watched me patiently. There was no skepticism in his gaze, only understanding. "Do you want to talk about it?" The question caught me off guard. Since waking up, I had spoken only superficially about my experience. No detailed explanation, no mention of the visions, but maybe it was time to start. I swallowed hard. "I saw Jesus." Sister Agnes nodded, unsurprised. "And he told you something important, didn't he?" My hands tightened on the sheet and the avalanche of images came back to me. Yes, he showed me what is happening to the world, how people are exchanging their real connections for artificial ones, how technology is taking us away from God without us realizing it. Sister Agnes didn't look away. "And what do you think you should do with it?" The question was simple, but it hit me like a bolt of lightning. What should I do? Knowledge burned inside me. I couldn't just go back to the monastery as if nothing had happened. I couldn't continue managing religious social networks without thinking about the spiritual consequences of this. I had seen the truth, and the truth demanded action. I took a deep breath and said, with my voice firmer since I had returned, "I need to tell the world." The nun smiled slightly as if she already knew the answer before I even said it. "Then start." Those words seemed to seal something inside me. What had been a burden now became a calling. The next day, I picked up a notebook and started writing. Every word, every vision, every revelation. It didn't matter how many people would believe it or not. What mattered was that I had been sent back to share the message. I had no doubt that what I was about to say would upset a lot of people. But the question was not whether they were ready to listen. The question was if they could silence the world around them enough to listen. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.